The mansion on Oak Ridge Drive didn't smell like money. It smelled like lavender floor cleaner and secrets that refused to stay buried. Naomi Ellis moved through the marble hallway with practiced silence, her cleaning cart wheels barely whispering against the imported Italian tile. 43 years old, skin like polished mahogany, hands that had scrubbed other people's dirt for 2 decades. She wore the standard gray uniform, shapeless, forgettable, designed to make her invisible. That invisibility was her survival. From the East Wing, laughter bubbled up like champagne left too long in the sun. High-pitched, breathy, the kind of sound that didn't belong at 2 in the afternoon when Mr. Harrington was at his law firm downtown. Naomi paused, one hand on her cleaning spray. She knew that laugh. Celeste Harrington, the lady of the house, all blonde highlights and Pilates-toned limbs, had a very specific laugh for very specific occasions. The gym door stood slightly ajar. Don't look. You don't get paid to look. But the human eye disobeys commands when curiosity knocks. Through the 6-inch gap, Naomi saw them. Celeste stretched across a yoga mat, her sports bra hiked higher than any downward dog required. Leo Alvarez, personal trainer, ridiculous jawline, contract renewed every 3 months, hovered above her with hands that weren't checking her form so much as appreciating it. Just like that, Celeste murmured, her voice dripping with things that had nothing to do with core strength. Naomi's stomach twisted. She stepped back, the cleaning spray now slippery in her palm. This wasn't the first time. It wouldn't be the last. Mrs. Harrington knew Naomi had seen things. Mr. Harrington suspected his wife was distant for reasons beyond stress. And Leo? Leo just smiled at everyone like the world was his buffet. But Naomi? Naomi said nothing, because silence had a price tag, and Celeste Harrington paid well above minimum wage to keep mouths shut and eyes blind. Naomi touched the thin chain around her neck, feeling the small brass key dangling there. Tarnished. Dull. It belonged to Ellis Laundry, the dry cleaning shop her mother had lost to a predatory loan 6 years ago. The key opened nothing now. The locks had been changed. The building sat empty, gutted, waiting. But Naomi kept it, because some doors were worth remembering, even when you couldn't walk through them anymore. She returned to her cart, grabbed the mop, and began cleaning the floor outside the gym. The sounds inside continued. Laughter, low murmurs, the rhythmic creak of expensive equipment being misused. Naomi worked around them the way water flows around stone. Steady. Unremarkable. Necessary. When Celeste emerged 20 minutes later, hair damp and cheeks flushed, she didn't look at Naomi. She looked past her, the way you look past furniture or light fixtures, things that serve a function but don't require acknowledgement. Leo followed, towel around his neck, grinning like a man who'd just won a hand of poker he didn't deserve. "Naomi," Celeste said, her tone casual, conversational. "Victor's shirts need to be pressed for tomorrow's deposition, and I'll need fresh linnels in the guest suite by 6. We're having dinner with the Carmichaels." "Yes, ma'am." Celeste paused at the base of the staircase, one manicured hand on the banister. She glanced back just once. Their eyes met. And in that split second, an entire negotiation occurred without words. "You saw. I saw. You'll keep quiet. I'll keep quiet." "Good." Celeste ascended the stairs, her footsteps light, unburdened. Naomi returned to the hallway closet where she kept her personal bag. She pulled out her phone and opened the calculator app. Not to calculate, but to stare at the running tally she'd been keeping for 9 months. Goal, $47,000 saved, $31,200. The math was simple. Another year of silence, maybe less, and she and Marcus could buy back Ellis Laundry, reopen it, restore it, make her mother's ghost smile. 1 year of being blind. 1 year of swallowing truth like bitter medicine. Naomi locked her phone and returned to work, the key around her neck cold against her skin. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance. Rain was coming. Some houses are cleaned with money, Naomi thought as she wrung out the mop. But some houses only get clean when the truth is finally mopped up. Home was a third-floor walk-up, in a neighborhood where sirens were the evening soundtrack, and corner stores had bulletproof glass at the register. But it was theirs. Paid for, fought for. A fortress built from 2 incomes and relentless optimism. Marcus Ellis sat at the kitchen table, spreadsheets open on his laptop, calculator clicking like a mechanical heartbeat. Numbers guy. Always had been. He worked IT support at a call center, fixing other people's problems while his own dreams sat filed under pending. Naomi dropped her bag by the door and kicked off her shoes. Her feet ached. Everything ached. "How was your day?" Marcus asked without looking up. "Fine." "Just fine?" She moved to the sink, filled a glass with tap water, drank it like she'd crossed a desert. When she spoke, her voice was flat. "Celeste is sleeping with Leo." Marcus's fingers paused over the keyboard. 2 seconds. 3. Then they resumed typing. "You sure?" "I'm sure." "You see it or you hear it?" "Does it matter?" He closed the laptop, finally meeting her eyes. Marcus had a kind face, round, soft at the edges, with smile lines that hadn't been earned through laughter but through making peace with disappointment. He reached for her hand across the table. "Nay, baby, listen. What happens in that house, it's not our business." "I know that. You know it, but you're feeling some type of way about it." She pulled her hand back. "Wouldn't you?" "What I feel doesn't pay the bills." He tapped the laptop screen. "We're close, Nay. $15,800 away from the down payment. 1 year. Maybe less if you pick up those holiday shifts Mrs. Harrington mentioned." "So you're saying I should keep quiet?" "I'm saying we have a plan. We've been working toward this for 6 years. Your mama's shop, our shop, it's right there. We just gotta reach." Naomi leaned against the counter, arms crossed. The key around her neck caught the overhead light, winking like a conspirator. "Celeste gave me a raise today." Marcus's eyes widened. "How much?" $5 an hour." "5." He stood up, the chair scraping loud against linoleum. "Nay, that's over $800 extra a month. That's... Jesus, that moves everything up. We could hit our goal by spring." She gave it to me because she knows I saw. The room went quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant bass from the apartment below. Marcus sat back down slowly. "Okay, so she's paying you to keep your mouth shut. That's smart business." "Smart business?" Naomi repeated, the words tasting like copper. "Don't look at me like that. You think Victor Harrington doesn't know his wife is messy? Rich people aren't like us. They play different games. We're just trying to survive in their world long enough to build our own." "And what if I don't want to survive like this?" "Then what?" Marcus's voice rose slightly, frustration bleeding through. "You quit. You tell Victor. You blow up their marriage. And then what, Nay? You think Celeste Harrington is going to give you a reference after that? You think you'll get another cleaning job paying what this one does?" She didn't answer. He softened, standing to wrap his arms around her from behind. She let him, but her body stayed rigid. "I love you," he he whispered into her hair. "And I love that you got a good heart. But sometimes keeping your mouth shut ain't about being weak. It's about being smart." Naomi closed her eyes. Behind her lids, she saw her mother, Lorraine Ellis, hands raw from bleach and detergent, smiling anyway. Smiling always, right up until the bank took the shop, and the smile with it. "1 year," Marcus said. "Just 1 more year of playing their game. Then we're out. We're free." But freedom built on silence didn't feel like freedom at all. That night, while Marcus snored softly beside her, Naomi lay awake. She pulled out her phone and opened the photo album labeled Mama. There was Lorraine, standing in front of Ellis Laundry, the sign freshly painted, pride radiating from every pixel. Naomi's thumb hovered over the screen. "What would you do, Mama? Would you take the money? Would you swallow the truth?" No answer came. The dead don't advise the living. She put the phone away and stared at the ceiling, where water stains formed abstract shapes like Rorschach tests. A text buzzed. "Unknown number. Thank you for today, Naomi. Your discretion is valued. CH. Valued? Purchased. Same thing, apparently." She didn't reply. Just turned off the phone and held the key around her neck until sleep finally came. Victor Harrington wasn't what Naomi had expected. In her mind, men like him, corporate lawyers, old money, last names that appeared on hospital wings, existed in a separate dimension where problems were solved by assistants and empathy was outsourced to charity galas. But Victor was different. Quietly different. The kind of different that made Naomi nervous. It started small. A good morning that waited for her response. How are you? That actually paused for an answer. Then came the afternoon he found her in the kitchen, struggling with the espresso machine Celeste had imported from Milan and refused to let anyone touch. "May I?" he'd asked. She'd stepped aside, and he'd fixed it in 30 seconds. Some trick with the pressure valve he'd learned during a summer in Rome, 20 years ago. "Thank you, Mr. Harrington." "Victor's fine. Mr. Harrington makes me sound like my father, and trust me, that's not a compliment." She'd smiled despite herself, and that was the crack in the dam. Now, 3 weeks later, Victor had developed a habit of appearing in whatever room Naomi was cleaning. Not hovering, not watching. Just present. He'd sit at the kitchen island with his laptop, pretending to work while asking her opinion on everything from coffee brands to whether his daughter's boarding school was ruining her or saving her. "You have kids?" he asked one afternoon, while Naomi folded linens. "No, sir. Victor, not yet. Want them?" The question hung in the air like humidity before a storm. "Maybe," she said carefully. "If circumstances were right?" "Circumstances are never right. You just decide whether you want to live your life or wait for permission." She looked at him then. Really looked. Victor was 47. Graying at the temples in that way magazines called distinguished on white men and old on everyone else. Tired eyes, good suit, slightly rumpled. Wedding ring that he twisted absently, like a loose tooth he couldn't stop tonguing. "You okay, Victor?" The question surprised them both. He laughed, sharp, hollow. "Define okay." "Breathing, upright. Not actively bleeding." "Then I'm spectacular." He paused. "My wife throws dinner parties where she talks to everyone except me. My daughter calls twice a year, birthday and Christmas like clockwork, like obligation. My law partners think I'm brilliant. My therapist thinks I'm depressed. And my maid is the only person who asks if I'm okay. I'm not supposed to ask things like that." Maybe that's exactly why I answered. They stood in silence, the only sound the soft hum of the dryer in the adjacent laundry room. Naomi resumed folding. Victor watched her hands, steady, methodical, creating order from chaos. "You're good at that," he said. "It's my job." "No, I mean, you're good at making things feel peaceful, present. My whole life feels like I'm running late to somewhere I don't want to go, but when you're here, the house feels, I don't know, less empty. Danger. That was danger talking. Naomi recognized it the way you recognize smoke before you see fire. "I should finish the upstairs." "Of course, I didn't mean to." "It's fine." But it wasn't fine, and they both knew it. Later that week, Celeste hosted one of her infamous dinner parties. Naomi worked late, serving wine and clearing plates while Celeste laughed too loud at jokes that weren't funny and touched the arms of men who weren't her husband. Victor sat at the head of the table like a king at his own execution, smiling politely, contributing nothing. When the guests moved to the study for cigars and cognac, Naomi found Victor on the back terrace, tie loosened, jacket discarded, staring at the pool like it held answers. "They're asking for you inside," she said. "Let them ask." She should have left, should have returned to the kitchen, finished cleaning, gone home to Marcus and their plan and their future. Instead, she stood beside him. "My wife is sleeping with her trainer," Victor said calmly, like he was commenting on the weather. Naomi's breath caught. Don't pretend you don't know. You see everything in this house. That's why Celeste pays you what she does." He turned to face her. "I'm not angry at you, Naomi. I'm just tired of pretending I don't notice. Tired of smiling while my life happens around me instead of to me. I'm sorry. Don't be. I made my choices. Married for the right reasons according to everyone except me. Built a life that looks perfect in Christmas cards and feels like a mausoleum the other 364 days." His hand rested on the terrace railing. Naomi's hand was 6 inches away. The space between them felt like a chasm and a whisper all at once. "You deserve better," she said quietly. "So do you." Their eyes met, and in that moment something shifted. Subtle, seismic, irreversible. Victor pulled back first. "I should return to my guests." "Yes, sir." "Victor." "Victor." He walked away, and Naomi stood alone under the stars, her heart beating against her ribs like a prisoner testing the bars. The test sat on the bathroom counter like an accusation. 2 pink lines. Clear. Unmistakable. Definitive. Naomi's hands trembled as she wrapped it in toilet paper and buried it deep in the trash, as if hiding the evidence could change the verdict. 6 weeks. Maybe 7. She counted backward, her mind racing through calendars and moments and mistakes. The night Marcus came home early from his conference, we celebrated his promotion. We were careful, but the afternoon Victor's hand brushed hers, reaching for the same coffee cup. The evening on the terrace. The night Celeste was in New York, and Victor came home to an empty house and found Naomi still there, late, folding laundry in the guest suite. No. That night, nothing had happened. Not really. They'd talked. Just talked. For 2 hours, sitting on opposite ends of the sofa like magnets fighting their own attraction. He'd told her about his daughter's last letter. Cold, transactional, written like a business email. She'd told him about her mother's shop, about the smell of pressed cotton and lavender sachets, about dreams that die slowly and debts that live forever. And when he'd stood to leave, he'd paused. just paused. For 5 seconds, that felt like 5 years, but he'd walked away. They both had. So whose child was this? Naomi sat on the closed toilet lid, head in her hands. The bathroom tiles were cold beneath her feet. The fluorescent light hummed overhead like a confession waiting to be made. She had to tell Marcus. That evening, Marcus came home with Chinese takeout and a smile that died the moment he saw her face. "What's wrong?" She handed him the test without preamble. No introduction. No softening the blow. He stared at it, looked at her, looked back at the test. Then, slowly, impossibly, he smiled. Baby, this is... I don't know if it's yours." The smile froze, then melted like wax, too close to flame. "What?" "I don't know if the baby is yours." Her voice was steady, mechanical. The words came out like she was reading from a script she'd memorized against her will. Marcus sat down heavily on the couch, the takeout containers forgotten on the counter. Victor Harrington. It wasn't a question. Maybe. I don't know. Nothing happened, Marcus, I swear, we never... But something could have happened. His voice was quiet, dangerous in its calm. Something close enough that you don't know. She wanted to protest, to explain, to defend herself against an accusation he hadn't quite made. But the truth was sharper than denial. "We talked, that's all. But the timing, I can't be sure." Silence filled the apartment like smoke. Then Marcus did something unexpected. He laughed, not bitter, not cruel, thoughtful. Okay, let me think." He stood, paced, ran his hands over his face. "If the baby's mine. Beautiful. We raise it, we keep saving, we get the shop. Marcus. If the baby's his..." He stopped pacing, turned to face her. "Nay, do you understand what this means? A Harrington baby. That's child support. That's connections. That's leverage." She stood, backing away from him like he'd grown a second head. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about securing our future. You think Victor Harrington is just going to let his kid grow up in a third-floor walk-up? No. He'll pay. He'll want to pay to keep it quiet. And that money, baby, that money gets us the shop and a house. That money sets us up for life. You want me to..." She couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't articulate the horror blooming in her chest. "I want us to be smart. I want us to recognize an opportunity when..." "An opportunity? Marcus, this is a child. Our child. Maybe. Exactly. Ours. And we protect what's ours by making sure we have the resources to raise it right." He reached for her hands. She pulled away. "Nay, listen to me. You already know too much about that house. Celeste and Leo, Victor and you. This isn't blackmail, it's negotiation. It's evening the playing field. This is our baby. And I want our baby to have everything, don't you?" She stared at the man she'd married. The man she'd built spreadsheets with and dreamed small, achievable dreams with. The man who'd held her when her mother died and promised they'd restore what was lost. But this man calculating paternity like a stock option, she didn't recognize him. "I need air," she whispered. "Nay." She grabbed her jacket and left, Marcus's voice following her down the stairwell until distance swallowed it whole. She ended up at the bus stop 3 blocks away, not waiting for a bus, just sitting on the bench under the flickering streetlight. Cars passed. People passed. The world kept moving while hers fractured. Her phone buzzed. A text from Victor. "Are you all right? You left your sweater in the kitchen. I can bring it by your place if you'd like." She stared at the message, started to type, deleted it. started again. I need to tell you something. Can we meet? The response came within seconds. Anywhere, anytime. She gave him the address of a coffee shop near the park. Neutral ground, public, safe. When she arrived, he was already there, sitting in the back corner with 2 cups of tea. He stood when he saw her, concern etched across his face. Naomi, what's wrong? She sat. He sat. The tea went cold between them. I'm pregnant. Victor's face went through several emotions in rapid succession. Surprise, confusion, then something softer. That's... congratulations? It might be yours. The words landed like stones in still water. He didn't speak, didn't move. Just sat there, processing, his lawyer's brain working through implications and logistics and laws. Finally, how do you feel about that? The question broke something in her. Not, is it mine? Not, are you sure? Just, how do you feel? Terrified, she whispered. Marcus wants to use it, use you. He thinks if it's yours, we can negotiate. Victor's jaw tightened. And what do you want? I want to keep it. I want it to be loved. I want... She looked at him. This man who'd somehow become more real to her than her own husband. I want to not feel like I sold every piece of myself to survive. He reached across the table. Stopped halfway. His hand hovered in the space between them. That same 6-inch chasm that had always existed, always mattered. Then he closed it. His hand covered hers. Then don't. Whatever this baby is, whoever's DNA is involved, it deserves better than transactions, and so do you. Naomi felt tears slip down her cheeks for the first time in years. Not from sadness, from being seen, from someone asking what she wanted instead of telling her what she needed. I don't know what to do, she said. Neither do I. But we'll figure it out. Together, if you want. She squeezed his hand. Held on. Let herself be held. Outside, rain began to fall. Inside, something new and fragile began to grow. The invitation came on ivory cardstock, hand-delivered by a courier in a black sedan. Dinner, 7 p.m. Attendance mandatory. CH. Naomi held the card like it might explode. Celeste didn't do dinner invitations with staff. This was a summons, a trial, an execution with appetizers. Marcus got one too. So did Victor. So did Leo. 4 people. 1 table. All the secrets served alongside the entree. The dining room had been transformed. Usually reserved for Celeste's fundraising galas and networking spectacles, tonight it felt intimate. Claustrophobic. 4 place settings. 4 chairs. No escape routes. Naomi arrived first, still wearing her uniform because she'd come straight from an afternoon shift. The gray fabric felt like armor that wouldn't protect her from anything. Victor entered second, tie slightly loosened, exhaustion etched into his features. He saw Naomi and started toward her, then stopped, aware they were being watched. Leo arrived third, all swagger and cologne, clearly confused why he'd been invited to anything that wasn't a training session. Marcus came last, dressed in his interview suit, the one he wore when he wanted to look serious. Professional, in control. They stood around the table like strangers at a funeral, waiting for the deceased to arrive. Celeste made them wait. Power move. 15 minutes of uncomfortable silence before she descended the stairs in a white dress that probably cost more than Naomi's annual salary, her heels clicking against marble like a countdown. Please, sit. Not a request. They sat. Celeste remained standing at the head of the table, a conductor before her orchestra. I'm sure you're all wondering why I've gathered you here. Her smile was porcelain. Beautiful. Breakable. Deadly. I believe in transparency, honesty, clearing the air. She clicked a remote. A projector screen descended from the ceiling. Naomi's stomach dropped. The first image, Celeste and Leo in the gym. Tangled, obvious. The second image, Victor and Naomi on the terrace, his hand covering hers. The third image, Marcus and Leo at a bar downtown, laughing, conspiratorial, each photo time-stamped, catalogued, weaponized. I have cameras everywhere, Celeste said conversationally, like discussing interior design choices. Smart home technology. Wonderful thing. My security company sends me alerts whenever there's unusual activity. Leo shifted uncomfortably. Marcus's face had gone pale. Victor stared at his wife with something between disgust and resignation. Naomi felt numb, exposed, violated. So, let's be honest, shall we? Celeste continued. Leo, you're sleeping with me because I pay you obscene amounts of money, and you think it'll lead to something more. Spoiler, it won't. Leo opened his mouth to protest. Closed it. Victor, you're having an emotional affair with our maid because I've been emotionally unavailable for years, and you're too much of a coward to just ask for a divorce. Victor's jaw clenched. Celeste? And Naomi. She turned, all false sympathy. Poor, sweet Naomi, pregnant with a baby that might belong to my husband, or might belong to yours. What a delicious little mess. The room temperature dropped 10 degrees. Marcus inhaled sharply. He hadn't known she'd told Victor. Hadn't known Victor knew. Here's what's going to happen, Celeste said, pacing now, enjoying her performance. Naomi, you're going to terminate the pregnancy, quietly, discreetly. I'll pay for the procedure and give you a severance package. Let's say $50,000. You'll sign an NDA. You'll disappear from our lives. No. The word came from Naomi, quiet but absolute. Celeste blinked. I'm sorry? No. Louder now. Naomi stood, her chair scraping backward. I'm not terminating. I'm not signing. I'm not disappearing. Then you'll lose everything. I'll make sure you never work in this city again. You'll what? Naomi's voice shook, but not from fear, from fury finally unleashed. Destroy my reputation? I'm a cleaning lady, Mrs. Harrington. I don't have a reputation. I have integrity, which is something you can't buy and wouldn't recognize if it slapped you across your Botoxed face. Marcus stood. Nay, wait. Sit down, Marcus. She turned to him. This man who'd calculated their child's value like a business transaction. You wanted me to negotiate, to leverage, to play their game? She gestured at the photos still projected on the screen. This is their game, and I don't want to win anymore. Victor stood slowly, deliberately. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of years suppressed. Celeste, I'm filing for divorce. Tomorrow. I'm done pretending this marriage is anything except a tax shelter with sleeping arrangements. Celeste's composure cracked. You can't. I can. I am. You can have the house, the cars, the vacation properties. I want custody of Sarah and I want out. He turned to Naomi, not touching her, not claiming her, just seeing her. I don't know if that baby is mine. Statistically, probably not. But if you're willing, I'd like to be part of its life. Not as a replacement for Marcus, not as a transaction, just as someone who cares about what happens to you. To it, if you'll let me. Naomi's throat tightened. Why? Because you asked me how I felt before you made any demands, and no one's done that in 20 years. Marcus erupted. So that's it? You're just gonna walk away from our plan? Our life? There is no our anymore, Marcus. There's me, and there's you, and those are different things now. She turned back to Celeste. I quit. Effective immediately. Keep your severance. Keep your NDA. I don't need your money to be free of you. She walked towards the door. Victor followed. Naomi, wait. I need to do this alone. For once, I need to choose myself before anyone else gets a vote. She left them there. Marcus calculating, Celeste seething, Leo confused, Victor watching her go with something like respect. Outside, the air tasted like rain and revolution. The third-floor walk-up felt smaller now. Or maybe Naomi had just grown larger. Physically, yes, but also in presence, in consequence, in the space she allowed herself to occupy. She'd returned home after the dinner implosion to find Marcus already gone. His laptop, his charger, his gym bag vanished. A note on the kitchen counter. Staying at Derek's. Need time to think. No apology. No questions about her well-being. Just absence where partnership used to live. Fine. She'd raised herself before. She could do it again. Money became the next problem. Obvious in hindsight, catastrophic in present tense. Without Celeste's salary, Naomi's bank account evaporated like water on summer concrete. Rent was due in 18 days. She had $200 to her name, and a baby requiring approximately $1 million over the next 18 years, give or take. She applied to every cleaning service in a 30-mile radius. Got callbacks from 3. Can you provide a reference from your last employer? It's complicated. We'll need a reference. Click, dial tone, door closed. Celeste had been efficient. One phone call to her network, the interconnected web of country clubs and charity boards and women who brunch, and Naomi was radioactive. The 4th rejection email was more honest. We've been advised that hiring you might create liability concerns. Translation. Celeste Harrington wields power like a scalpel, and your career is bleeding out. The eviction notice came on a Tuesday. 30 days to vacate. Lease violation. Noise complaints filed by the landlord's daughter, who lived in Florida, and had never heard a sound from Naomi's apartment. More of Celeste's handiwork. Naomi sat on her floor, back against the wall. The notice crumpled beside her. The apartment was cold. Heat had been mysteriously shut off yesterday. Repairs pending. She should have been crying, should have been panicking. Instead, she felt weirdly calm, numb, like watching a movie about someone else's life falling apart. Her phone buzzed. Victor. I heard about your eviction. That's illegal. I can help. Please let me help. She stared at the message for a long time before responding. How did you hear about it? I have a friend at the housing authority. Celeste is playing dirty. There's a pattern. I don't need rescuing. I'm not trying to rescue you. I'm trying to even the playing field. There's a difference. She almost blocked his number. Almost. But desperation makes strange accountants, and she was running out of options. What did you have in mind? The apartment Victor found wasn't luxury. Just clean. Safe. In a neighborhood where gunshots weren't ambient noise, and grocery stores sold fresh vegetables. It's a sublet, he explained, standing in the empty living room while Naomi examined the working heat and functional locks. Friend of mine owns the building, month to month, no background check, no references needed. I can't afford this. It's paid for, 6 months up front. Victor, before you argue, it's not charity. Consider it. Severance pay from the Harrington family for hostile termination of employment. He smiled slightly. Plus, legally speaking, if that baby is mine, I have a responsibility to ensure its mother isn't living in unsafe conditions. Naomi leaned against the kitchen counter. It was granite. Real granite. And if it's not yours? Then I helped someone who needed help. Either way, I sleep better. She wanted to refuse. Pride demanded it. But pride didn't pay rent, and her baby needed walls and heat more than her ego needed protecting. 6 months, she said finally. After that, I figure it out myself. Deal. They shook hands. Formal, transactional, a contract between adults instead of a rescue mission. There's one more thing, Victor said, pulling an envelope from his jacket. I filed divorce papers yesterday. Celeste is not pleased. She's likely to escalate. Escalate how? However she can. She's already frozen joint accounts, filed injunctions to keep me from dissipating assets, and sent cease and desist letters to my law partners suggesting I've engaged in ethics violations. She fights dirty, Naomi, and she knows your connection to me makes you a target. So I'm collateral damage. You're someone she wants to erase, but you don't erase easily, do you? Naomi thought of her mother, Lorraine Ellis, who'd scrubbed other people's floors for 30 years and still held her head high, who'd lost everything and never lost her smile. No, Naomi said quietly. I don't. That night, alone in her new apartment, Naomi unpacked the few belongings she'd managed to grab from the walk-up before the locks were changed. Clothes, books, the framed photo of her mother, and the key, the tarnished brass key to Ellis Laundry, hanging on its chain. She held it up to the light, studying the worn edges and scratches. It opened nothing now. The locks had been changed years ago. The building sat empty, gutted, waiting to be razed or reborn. But it meant something. It meant remembering where you came from. It meant doors that closed could be opened again, with different keys in different hands. She fastened the chain around her neck and looked around her new, temporary home. 6 months, she thought. 6 months to figure out who I am when I'm not cleaning up someone else's mess. Outside, the city hummed. Inside, Naomi slept soundly for the first time in weeks. 3 months passed, like seasons compressed. Winter thawing into spring, Naomi's body changing in ways both miraculous and terrifying. The baby was real now. Not just abstract possibility, but tangible presence. Kicks at 2 a.m., cravings for pickles and peanut butter. An ultrasound photo pinned to the refrigerator showing a profile that looked simultaneously alien and achingly human. The technician had asked if she wanted to know the sex. Not yet, Naomi had said. Some mysteries deserved to remain. Mysteries a little longer. Work came in fragments. A cleaning service that didn't ask questions hired her for overnight shifts at office buildings. Vacuum, mop, empty trash, gone before daylight. The pay was terrible. The hours were worse. But it was honest. And honest felt like luxury after months of navigating other people's lies. She saved every dollar. Not for Ellis Laundry anymore. That dream felt like it belonged to a different person, a different life. Now she saved for diapers and formula and the 1,000 small necessities that come with being someone's entire world. The key still hung around her neck. She considered selling it. Brass had value, even tarnished brass. But every time she reached for the clasp, her fingers froze. Some things weren't meant to be sold. Some things were meant to be carried. Victor called once a week. Always the same time. Sunday mornings, when the world felt quieter and less demanding. How are you feeling? Tired. Huge. Craving things that don't exist in nature. That's oddly specific. I wanted chocolate-covered bacon at 3 a.m. last week. The baby has questionable taste. He laughed. It was a good sound. Genuine, unguarded, the kind of laugh that didn't happen in courtrooms or boardrooms. How's the divorce going? She asked. Slowly, expensively. Celeste's lawyers are very good at making simple things complicated. He paused. She's demanding full custody of Sarah. Claims I'm unfit due to moral turpitude. That's a legal term meaning she's grasping at straws. Sarah turns 18 in 4 months anyway. She gets to choose where she spends holidays, and she's already told both of us she's choosing her college dorm over either parent. His voice carried old wounds wrapped in acceptance. We did that, both of us. Put her in the middle of a Cold War and wondered why she enlisted elsewhere. Naomi shifted on the couch, trying to find a position where her spine didn't ache. You going to be okay? Are you? I asked first. Then yes, I'm going to be okay. Better than okay, actually. I'm going to be free. Another pause, heavier this time. Have you heard from Marcus? No. You? He called me 3 weeks ago. Drunk? Angry? Wanted to know if I'd stolen his wife? Victor's tone hardened. I told him you can't steal what isn't property. He hung up. Naomi closed her eyes. Marcus, the man she'd built spreadsheets with. The man who'd held her after her mother's funeral and promised they'd rebuild what was lost. But promises written in ink dissolve when tested by water. I don't hate him, she said quietly. You don't have to. But I don't love him either. Not anymore. Maybe not for a while. That's okay too. They talked for another 20 minutes about nothing important. Weather, news, a documentary about octopuses that Victor found weirdly compelling. Then he had to go. Some meeting with his lawyers. Another round in the endless procedural war that was his marriage's ending. Naomi. Yeah? Thank you. For what? For calling me Victor instead of Mr. Harrington. For treating me like a person instead of a problem. He trailed off, searching for words lawyers don't usually need. For being honest, even when it hurt, especially when it hurt. She smiled, though he couldn't see it. You're welcome, Victor. After they hung up, she sat with her hand on her belly, feeling the subtle movements beneath her palm. You're going to have a complicated family, she whispered to the baby. No dad on the birth certificate. A mom who cleans buildings at night. Maybe a friend named Victor who might be your biological father, or might just be someone who cares. The baby kicked in response. Agreement or protest, impossible to say. But you'll be loved. I promise you that. However this family looks, whatever shape it takes, you'll be loved. That afternoon, Naomi walked to the old location of Ellis Laundry. The building was still there, barely. Windows boarded, facade crumbling. A developer's sign promised luxury condos coming 2026. She stood on the sidewalk, key in hand, studying the door she'd walked through thousands of times as a child. Her mother teaching her to fold fitted sheets. The smell of starch and steam. The rhythmic thump of industrial dryers like heartbeats. It was gone. Really gone. Not coming back, but standing there, belly round with future key cold against her palm, Naomi realized something. The key had never been about opening that specific door. It had been about remembering she came from people who built things, who worked with their hands and their hearts, and never apologized for either. She unclasped the chain, held the key up to catch the afternoon light. Then she walked to the nearest donation box, One of those metal bins where people leave clothes and household items for charity. She dropped the key inside, heard it land with a soft clink among someone else's discarded belongings. Someone would find it. Wonder what it opened? Maybe keep it. Maybe throw it away. Either way, it wasn't hers to carry anymore. She walked home lighter, freer, ready for whatever door opened next. The baby came on a Tuesday. No drama. No emergency dash to the hospital. Just Naomi's water breaking during the breakfast shift at an office complex. A calm Uber ride to the hospital, and 8 hours of labor that felt both eternal and impossibly fast. At 4:47 p.m., Marcus Elijah Ellis Harrington entered the world. 6 pounds, 3 ounces, full head of black hair, lungs that worked spectacularly well. Naomi held him and understood, for the first time, what people meant when they said, "I'd die for you." Not metaphor, literal truth. This tiny, screaming creature had rewired her entire existence in the span of a breath. The nurse asked about the birth certificate. Father's name? Naomi looked at her son, at the tiny fists and impossible eyelashes and the face that looked like, well, like a baby. No definitive answers written in his features. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Unknown, she said. The nurse made a note without judgment. Middle name? Elijah. After someone? After a prophet who learned to hear God in silence instead of thunder. The nurse smiled. That's beautiful. Victor arrived 3 hours later, still in his suit from court, tie loosened, exhaustion and joy fighting for dominance on his face. Can I? Naomi shifted the baby carefully into his arms. Victor held him like he was made of glass and miracles. Hello, Marcus Elijah, he whispered. I'm Victor. I might be your dad. I might just be your mom's friend. Either way, I'm going to show up. That's a promise. The baby yawned, entirely unimpressed. Naomi laughed, then winced. Everything hurt in ways she'd forgotten bodies could hurt. How do you feel? Victor asked. Like I was torn apart and badly reassembled, but also like I could fight a bear. Please don't fight any bears. No promises. They sat in comfortable silence, the hospital room's fluorescent lights buzzing softly overhead. Outside, the city moved on. Sirens, traffic, people rushing toward destinations they might never reach. Inside, time moved differently. Slower. Heavier with meaning. I have something for you, Victor said eventually. He set the baby carefully in the bassinet and pulled a folder from his briefcase. I've been working with some partners, starting a non-profit, Second Chance Staffing Solutions. We connect people with employment barriers to companies committed to fair hiring practices. That's good. That's really good. Our first partner is a commercial laundry service, industrial scale. They need an operations manager, someone with experience, integrity, and skin in the game. He slid the folder across the bedside table. I thought you might know someone. Naomi opened it. Inside, a job offer. Salary, benefits, childcare stipend. The address of the facility was 2 blocks from where Ellis Laundry used to stand. Victor, I can't. You can. You've run operations before, just on a smaller scale. This is the same work, bigger machines. They're willing to train. And there's something else. He pulled out a second document. A lease agreement for a small retail space. Same neighborhood. Available for rent at below market rates through a community development grant. I don't understand. The laundry facility handles commercial accounts, hotels, hospitals, restaurants, But there's no quality residential service in that area. You could start small, build slow, do it right this time. Not as desperation, but as choice. Naomi stared at the papers, at this man who kept showing up, kept believing in doors that didn't exist yet. Why are you doing this? Victor looked at the baby sleeping peacefully in his bassinet. Because when I was drowning in a marriage that felt like slow suffocation, you asked me if I was okay. Nobody else asked. Not my partners, not my therapist, not my own daughter. He turned back to Naomi. You gave me permission to be honest about my life. I'm just trying to return the favor. This is more than a favor, Victor. Maybe. Or maybe it's just evening the scales. You lost a job, an apartment, and a marriage because you refused to be complicit in someone else's lies. That shouldn't be punished. It should be celebrated. Naomi felt tears slip down her cheeks. Happy tears. Exhausted tears. Tears that tasted like salt and possibility. I don't know if Marcus is your son, she said quietly. I know. But I'd like you to be in his life, in our lives, however that looks. Victor smiled. Genuine, unguarded, the kind of smile that didn't happen in courtrooms. I'd like that too. 6 months later, Naomi stood in front of a storefront with fresh paint and new signage. Ellis & Sons Laundry Professional Care for what you value most. The doors were glass. Modern. Nothing like the old place. But the smell inside, lavender and pressed cotton and hope, that was the same. Marcus Elijah sat in a carrier on the counter, watching his mother fold linens with the practiced ease of someone born to this work. Victor had stopped by earlier, officially off duty, just to see the space and hold the baby while Naomi dealt with a difficult customer. Is he yours? The customer had asked, nodding at the baby. Victor had looked at Naomi. Naomi had looked at Victor. Yes, they'd answered together. Because DNA was just chemistry. Family was choice. That evening, after the last customer left and the machines quieted, Naomi locked the front door and stood in the center of her shop. Her shop, breathing in the smell of clean things and new beginnings. She thought about keys, about the brass one she'd carried for years and finally released, about how some doors require keys, but the most important ones just require someone brave enough to turn the handle. Marcus Elijah cooed from his carrier. Naomi picked him up, held him close, and whispered the same thing her mother had once whispered to her. We build things in this family. We lose them. We build them again. That's what makes us who we are. Outside, the streetlights flickered on. Inside, a new story was just beginning.